following excerpt is from the Louisiana Summit on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking.
One of the things that Pope Francis talks about regularly is trying to discover the root causes. Now, I'm going to address this as an American, not as a global person involved in human trafficking. But prior to coming to Zachary, I worked at a hospital that probably 50 feet away from the door of the hospital, they had a huge parking garage that held 600 plus cars. But if they caught you smoking a cigarette in that garage, it was a $150 fine. Wait a minute. You know, gas guzzling and diesel cars, 650 feet away, and you're going to penalize someone for one cigarette? Not that either one of them are healthy, okay? But we kind of lose the whole big picture. I think we kind of lose the whole big picture in reference to human trafficking when we say that someone who's being sold for sex, that's our problem today. I don't believe that. I believe that's a symptom of the problem in which we live and the society that has created the devaluation of human life. And I may offend someone's sensitivities. I don't intend to, but these are my deeply held religious beliefs, and I'm going to say it. When we get to a point, and Congressman Ted Poe was very eloquent when he said, all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Created Americans are not afforded that today. We forfeited that right many years ago. He didn't say born Americans. He didn't say viable Americans. He said created. And we've decided that created human beings are a matter of choice, and we don't give them a personhood. And therefore, mothers get to decide whether or not a baby gets born. And I know a lot of people will defend that as a woman's right. It's still, it's created. It's not a fetal blob. If you leave it alone, it will not become a turnip. It will come out a human being. We've just kind of accepted that. We've kind of accepted that as a matter of course. We've accepted the fact that we have a group of people who defines quality of life. And at a certain point, when people don't meet our quality of life, we have a right to terminate that. I'm sorry. As a priest, as a person, I believe that God is the author of life. Only God can give life, and only God can take life. I think it's in the Netherlands. I saw a story of two young 35-year-old twins, beautiful, healthy, handsome young men. They're twins. They discovered they had macular degeneration. And within a number of years, they were going to be blind. They chose to be euthanized. And the government provided that service for them. I just can't go there in my mind. Once we decide life belongs to us and it's our decision, where do we stop? We call them therapeutic abortions, but if they are not perfect little boys and girls, maybe Down syndrome or maybe have some deformity, we don't consider them humans. This is where our problems begin. We've objectified human life. We've objectified human life to the point that we see it as a matter of profit, pleasure, or possession. Think about the $42 billion a year pornography industry. Guys, that's our gig. Women are not the consumers of pornography. Men are. How many of us watch pornography and wonder whether or not they've made their confirmation or whether or not they go to church on Sunday? That's somebody's daughter. That's somebody's son. They have a soul and are created by the very same God that we're created by. We think that is a victimless crime. We had a young girl who grew up in the most exclusive neighborhood, a gated community in Baton Rouge. Through social media, she got hooked into the pornography industry. She was brought to Los Angeles to star in pornography, where she remembers an average of 30 favors a day. It took her parents a great deal of money, and it took them 14 months to rescue her. They brought back a shell of a daughter. A shell. I mean, almost catatonic. Just not plugged into anything. She's been a receptacle for hire for 14 months. When we reduce human life to a matter of profit, pleasure, or possession, are you really surprised we sell a whole living 12-year-old? Look at the matter of human sexuality that exists. You know, and it's quite frequent. We talk about friends with benefits. We talk about the hookup culture. And you say, that's their choice. That's their choice. They can do that. And yeah, in the land of the free, they can do that. They have a right to do that. But what does that do to the mentality of the human being about human sexuality? And when they don't have a friend who offers benefits, who are they going to buy? Because after all, that's what another person is good for. My pleasure. Years ago, I worked as LSU's chaplain for their basketball program. During the summertime, I had to feed all the kids because the dorm was closed. The kids would always come up, they'd bring their friends, and one little guy came like 3 weeks in a row, and he brought the same little girl. I said, hey, B, something going on there? And he wasn't being flip. He wasn't being ugly, and I'm going back 20 years. He said, no, we're just sport effing. That was his term. That was his term for the fact that he wasn't even sure of her last name. They were friends. They liked to have sex with each other, and it was okay. What does that mentality do to turning a blind eye to the trafficking of a person? You will see, and thanks to Lieutenant Chad Grimion, I've been able to work somewhat with law enforcement. I've been in their center, because I would never go to places like Backpage on my own personal computer and have that as a record, okay? I get in enough trouble without doing that, okay? That's not what we're tracking. But, you know, you say, hey, I'm in Zachary, Louisiana. I'm looking for, you know, a little entertainment. And you saw yesterday, they had these lists and these lists and these lists. Well, you start to see, like he showed you, the same tattoos. We're branding human beings like we used to brand cattle. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not just a question whether or not we can catch a trafficker, and we certainly need to. We need to change a mentality that's objectified human life, that another human being is an object of my pleasure. I grew up in the 60s, and you know, a bunch of kids, you know, you're playing, oh, I'd love to jump her bones. We said stuff like that. We didn't have the technology. No, really. But that was an idea. We saw a girl as someone we'd like to have sex with. And that's what attracted us to her. But we've done that. But we've taken it to a whole new level where we are at this point. And, you know, and I really believe that this is a cigarette next to 600 gas-guzzling diesel cars, that this is the one thing we're focusing on, and we're forgetting about a much larger picture that we have to address societally. So as we go about trying to rescue, trying to rehabilitate, trying to identify, trying to rebuild, yes, please God, we need to do that. But let's don't ignore the trends that we've come to accept as this is just the way things are right now, and this is the way society has changed. You know, and you hear this from kids. It's the hookup culture. What does that do about your view of another human person? They're just somebody there to serve my needs and serve my pleasure. And I say this as church, this section is about what the church's response is supposed to be. It's our responsibility. The people, the ministers of the gospel or the Quran or the Old Testament. I've told this to Bishop Sarando forever. We need to get in the pulpits. This stuff needs to come at us from the pulpit. From people of faith, we need to hear this. Our priests, our pastors, our reverends, our imams, our rabbis need to be trained in trying to affect a cultural change that's going to affect a society that has become very, very apathetic about the lack of the dignity of the human person. We remain indifferent. We hear it, you know, when we get involved in crimes and we see crimes. I mean, I remember as a kid, Richard Speck broke into a nursing dorm in 1969 in Peoria, Illinois, and he killed 6 nurses. That was like the crime of the century at the time. Boy, was he a rookie or what? No, I think I haven't been able to watch much news, but there's a person, they just found 7 bodies in his backyard just yesterday or today. We're just getting worse. And then we have people like Jeffrey Dahmer who want to kill him and eat him. I mean, we're ignoring the 600 cars that are smothering us. We're ignoring this aspect of society. I've told this to Bishop Sarando many times. He doesn't listen to me except when he's here, okay? But I would love to see, and I'm talking about the Catholic world now, and you from other faiths need to take that responsibility to your own pastors, your own pulpit, or your own imam or rabbi. But I'd like to see us train priests, educate priests, bring it to the pulpit, let people know, not just the fact of how many arrests we've had. Look at what's happening. All right, tell the Pope this, will you please? You know him, you're friends with him. But, you know, I mean, and this is the statistic as I go around, and I don't think Louisiana is unique in this. And we deal with juvenile victims. 40% of our juvenile victims are trafficked by their primary caregiver. And everybody goes, oh, really? Yeah, really. If it's happening within the family, how far down have we gone that even a parent can look at? We have a little girl that her dad started giving her drugs at the age of 11. Started having sex with her and selling her to all of his friends by the time she was 12. Put that in your mind and deal with that. If you'd come from that home. And we will hear from people who've been victims, but we don't think they were victims of their own mom and dad, my mother's boyfriend, my uncle. How sad is that? So, You know, people much wiser than me are dealing with the global picture, and I understand that. But I have the power of the pulpit in my own church, and I do use it. I ask my parishioners who are here. You know, we hear about it, but we have to, and not just in Zachary, in everywhere. And you know, I would love to see a ministers' conference throughout the state of Louisiana. Educate people. How many people here talk about human trafficking and they look at you like you have two heads? Oh, I know, but that doesn't happen here. Well, these aren't American kids, are they? That's our response. And so I think this is a large part of the global fight. I really do. Now, there are economic causes that create it. I understand that. That's a migration of peoples. I understand that. But you know, 70% of our girls who are runaways end up in trafficking, and 40% of our boys. Why are they runaways? Probably because something's going on in their home, either with a family member or an attached member in that family. That's what we're dealing with. And I really believe that as we talk about the church's response, that we need to educate. We need to educate people of faith. We need people of faith to bring it to the pulpit. That's the best way that we're going to find people who care. We've heard time and time again, right here from this podium, that the best rescuers are within the faith community. Regardless of the faith, the people who do it, they do it for the love of God, like these wonderful sisters we have in our midst. That's where we're going to change things. You can blame law enforcement all you want. You can blame prosecution. You can blame the court system. And all that needs to happen. But if we're going to eradicate human trafficking in the next generation, the restoration of the dignity of the human person is made in the image and likeness of God, regardless of what God you believe in, is essential to that. You heard the FBI say it's going to continue to go on. It's gone on since biblical times. Well, until we restore the dignity of every human being, we're going to have the problems. This is the cigarette being smothered by the 600 cars on top of it. But we have to deal with it, and we have to get the message out. And my perception is we have to get it on the pulpits of people of faith. And I would love for our next Vatican conference to be pulling people of faith from all over the world, and not just having 60 people in a room convinced of it. Let that go out one by one. The 12 became the 24 that became the 72. We do it like the apostles did. We start small and we grow it throughout the world. Thank you. People don't realize Louisiana has a huge problem with human trafficking. The worst corridor in the United States for human trafficking is I-10 between Houston and New Orleans. 40% of our juveniles who are trafficked in the state of Louisiana are trafficked by their primary caregivers. No one can fight this fight alone. We have to fight it together. Join us. We all have a role to play. Support us as we engage to save the next generation.
Log on to metanoiainc.org for more information. Thank you for your support.